Greetings, YouTube. This is Fragments of Memory once again, or Armchair Philosopher once again, depending on how you want to look at me. I saw a video by Testizel, and he talked about how hip hop has bamboozled the black community. And I listened to the vid, and then a couple of weeks later, because I know I'm probably late with responding to the video, I get this newspaper from a local St. Louis paper. It was it's distributed locally here in St. Louis. The name of it is the African News World, and it's a local organization here. I don't. It's an organ of the Universal African Peoples Organization, and it is a pro-black Afrocentric type of publication. And some guy gave it to me. But what was interesting was there was an article in here called "Exposing the Hip Hop Hoax." Hip Hop Hood Hoax, excuse me. Minister Paul Scott is the author, and I'll read a few excerpts from it just because it was interesting. Here's one. It says, "It may come as a shock for some, but the hip hop that is played on the radio today owes more to the campus of Harvard than it does the streets of Harlem. Most hip-hop fans can recite verbatim the often parroted propaganda about how hip-hop started in the parks of the Bronx in the late 70s and went on to become the global enterprise that it is today. Like most myths, there is a shred of truth in this hype. However, the whole truth is hidden from the masses." I'm going to go down. One flip through the pages of books like The Big Payback, The History of the Business of Hip Hop by Dan Charnison I, sees how quickly the focus on Grandmaster Flash spinning the Bronx switches to stories about Maury, the mild-mannered accountant thinking of a master plan to have his multinational company exploit the talents of ghetto youth, and the word ghetto is in quotes. This article goes on to say, contrary to the popular belief that commercial hip-hop is the brainchild of mix masters in the hood, in reality, much of the credit goes to the masterminds at Ivy League schools. While it is indeed true that hip-hop originated in the Big Apple, the moment that Rapper's Delight was played outside of the 5 boroughs, the corporate takeover of hip-hop began. And it's interesting that he's talking about that is because there was a woman by the name of Sylvia. She did a song called Pillow Talk back in the 70s. Well, anyway, it turns out she noticed that hip-hop was making a big splash in the New York scene. So she assembled a crew together, the Sugar Hill Gang, to create Rapper's Delight. If you don't believe me, you can go and research that. And she was able to capitalize on that. And of course, corporations were able to capitalize on the sound too. And the article goes on to say later, as interest in hip-hop spread throughout the world, the people who were largely responsible for defining what hip-hop is or is not were not the neighborhood scribes, but Ivy League brainiacs who interpreted the street lingo of the chocolate cities for the vanilla suburbs. Although rap is promoted as being the voice of the streets, it is interesting that the founders of hip-hop's premier magazine, The Source, Dave Mays and John Schechter, as well as early members of the Mind Squad, formed the magazine while they were students at Harvard during the late 80s. Something to think about. I'm going to skip, I think, this part here, and it goes, also, although rappers such as Waka Flocka Flame have said in interviews, that's a strange name. It has this sort of like Street Fighter mixed with the Muppets thing going on, but I digress. Have said in interviews that they purposely dumb down their lyrics to keep it real for their homies in the hood. according to a 2006 article in New York Magazine. One of the hottest producers at Bad Boy Records was Ryan Leslie, who scored 1,600 on his SAT, entered Harvard at 15, and graduated at 19 years old. Besides the money aspect, I'm skipping around just to let you roll, and I'm moving around like crazy because I'm laying down while I'm filming this, so this is kind of weird. Besides the money aspect, hip hop's influence on the minds of our youth and the strange behavior of some artists cannot be denied. Ironically, get this, Harvard is also famous for experiments in mind control. Dr. Timothy Leary, a professor in Harvard Center for Research in Personality in the early 60s, conducted mind control experiments involving psychedelic drugs. The whole turn on, tune in, drop out thing, Dr. Timothy Leary, that was so really brainchild of Harvard. According to Alex Constantine in his book The Covert War Against Rock, Adolphus Huxley, a visiting professor at Harvard, asked Leary to form a secret society to launch and lead a psychedelic conspiracy to brainwash influential people. Goes on to say, although Harvard has produced some of the most influential African Americans in this country's history, including scholar W.B. Du Bois, who was one of the founders of the NAACP, Soledad O'Brien, host of CNN series Black in America, and President Barack Obama and his wife, First Lady Michelle Obama. The institution has also been affiliated with some who believe that black folks are genetically and intellectually inferior to whites. William Shockley received his PhD from Harvard, and Arthur Jensen's How Much Can We Boost IQ and Scholastic Achievement was published in the 1969 Harvard Educational Review. Also, one of the authors of The Bell Curve, a 1994 book that also questioned the intelligence of African Americans, was co-authored by Harvard professor Richard Herrnstein. So is it possible that the current dumbed-down movement in hip-hop is a self-fulfilling prophecy orchestrated by those who will stop at nothing to prove a point? Also, so it's interesting that as we credit hip-hop for being the voice of the streets, really it may be an experiment from an Ivy League school, one of those ivory towers. So, Testizel, I didn't mean to just sit here and read article to you, but it's interesting that you were talking about that. I think you're on to something. I don't know what exactly, but I think you're on to something there. And I think we as blacks have bought into the whole hip hop mentality. Big time. I just also want to say thank you for kicking that vid out. There's also this whole series of vids by a guy by the name of Lennon Honor, and he really breaks it down about the whole hip hop and the way hip hop has actually demasculinized black men. And he breaks it down. I mean, all the way from Rapper's Delight. I mean, he had this whole series. It was like mind blowing to watch it. I don't know about the complete veracity of everything he says, but it is worth looking into, and it is something to think about and put on your mind. Shoot, he even broke down Slick Rick's Lottie Dottie, and that was just wow. Even the so-called conscious rap may not be as conscious as we think it is. So that's just something to put in your pipe and smoke. Well, take care, YouTube, and this is the Armchair Philosopher, over and out.